The pawn shop owner's voice on the phone was flat, almost apologetic. "Ma'am, I need you to come in. There's a problem with the ring your mother-in-law brought in this morning." I remember standing in the break room at the clinic, my paper cup of coffee going cold in my hand, thinking, I know exactly what the problem is. I put it there. But let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the 24 years before that phone call. My name is Diane. I'm 52 years old, and I work the front desk at a small family medicine clinic in Clover Falls, Tennessee, population just under 9,000. The kind of town where the high school football coach gets his own parking spot at the diner, and everybody knows which pharmacist will actually answer your questions, and which one just points at the package insert. I've worked that front desk for going on 16 years. I know every patient by name. I know who's on a payment plan, who needs an interpreter, who cries when they get a diagnosis, and who goes silent. I'm good at my job. I am very, very good at reading people. Which makes it that much harder to explain how I missed what was happening right inside my own home for so long. I married Roy Calloway in late June, 24 years ago. We were both in our late 20s, him 30, me 28. The wedding was small, held in his aunt's backyard in the July heat because we didn't have money for a venue. I wore my mother's altered dress and carried zinnias from a neighbor's garden. It was not glamorous. It was real, and I loved it. Roy is a decent man. I want to be clear about that, because what I'm about to tell you is not a story about a bad husband. It's a story about a weak one, and about how a weak man surrounded by a dominant sister is over time a different kind of danger than an outright cruel one. You don't see it coming. You keep making excuses. You keep believing that this time he'll hold the line. His sister's name is Brenda Calloway, never married, 55 now, lives 12 minutes from our house in a ranch-style place that Roy and I helped her buy the down payment for back in 2009 when she was between jobs. She paid us back eventually, most of it, but she never forgot that we'd helped, and somewhere along the way that gratitude curdled into something that looked a lot more like ownership. Brenda has always run the Calloway family the way a foreman runs a construction site, loud, certain, and completely convinced that her way is the only way that makes sense. When Roy's parents were alive, she managed their finances, their doctor's appointments, their holidays. When Roy's father passed 8 years ago and his mother Carol moved into assisted living, Brenda took over Carol's paperwork too. Roy signed whatever Brenda put in front of him. He always had. I used to tell myself it was love, that he trusted his sister, that family was complicated, that I should stay in my lane. I stayed in my lane for 24 years. The ring was my mother's. Not a diamond, nothing flashy, a small garnet set in rose gold with tiny seed pearls on either side. My grandmother wore it for 50 years before she passed it to my mother, and my mother gave it to me the Christmas before she died of a stroke 11 years ago. She slipped it onto my finger at the kitchen table and said, "You're the steady one, Diane. You'll keep it safe." I wore it on my right hand every single day after that. It was the only piece of jewelry I never took off. Until the morning of March 7th, when I woke up with my hands swollen from a sodium-heavy dinner the night before and decided to leave it on my nightstand rather than force it over a puffy knuckle. I left for work at 7:15. The clinic opens at 7:45 and I'm always there first. I came home to an empty house. Roy was at his buddy Greg's place watching a game. I didn't think anything of it. I went upstairs, reached for the ring on the nightstand. It wasn't there. I checked the bathroom counter, the dresser top. I got down on my knees and looked under the bed. I checked the windowsill, the bathroom again, the pocket of yesterday's cardigan. I told myself I'd misplaced it. I told myself that for about 40 minutes, moving through the house in a tightening spiral of dread, until Roy came home at 9 and I asked him if he'd seen it. He got very still. That stillness. I know that stillness. It's the stillness of a man who knows the answer and is deciding whether to tell the truth. Brenda stopped by. he said finally. He was looking at the kitchen counter, not at me. While you were at work. Something cold moved through my chest. And? She needed some cash, just to get through to her next paycheck. He shifted his weight. She saw the ring on the nightstand and, look, Diane, she knew it was valuable. Roy. My voice came out very quiet. That's what happens to me when I'm truly afraid. I don't yell. I go quiet. Where is my mother's ring? He rubbed the back of his neck. She took it to that pawn shop on Mercer Street. Just to get a loan on it, she said. She'll get it back. She said she'll have the money by... She pawned my grandmother's ring. I said it slowly, each word separate. The ring my mother gave me. The ring that belonged to my grandmother for 50 years. Brenda walked into our house while I was at work and took it off my nightstand and pawned it. It was just sitting there, Roy said, and I could hear in his voice that he was repeating something, repeating exactly what Brenda had told him, her framing, her justification, already loaded into him like a script. She said it was just sitting there, and she figured... She figured what, Roy? That it was hers to take? He didn't answer. And then, because Roy has never been able to sit with silence, he said something that I think about every day since. He actually smiled, this small, nervous, placating smile, and said, Look, you know, Brenda, in this family, everything is kind of shared, right? She said she'll get it back before you even... I held up my hand. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of our bed in the dark for a long time. I heard Roy moving around in the kitchen below me, opening the refrigerator, closing it, filling a glass of water, waiting for me to come down and accept the explanation the way I always had. The way I'd accepted 24 years of Brenda borrowing and overstepping and deciding what was hers to take because Roy would smooth it over and I would tell myself it wasn't worth the fight. I thought about my mother's hands, the way she'd slid that ring off her finger at the kitchen table, the weight of it, the way she'd said, You're the steady one, Diane. I thought, not this time. I came back downstairs and I asked Roy, very calmly, for the name of the pawn shop on Mercer Street. He blinked. What are you going to do? I'm going to make a phone call, I said. He laughed, actually laughed, the same nervous relief laugh he always uses when he thinks I'm being dramatic. Tonight? Diane, they're closed. It's almost 10 o'clock. You can just... I'm not calling tonight, I said. I'm calling tomorrow morning. First thing. I wrote down the name he gave me, Gold Star Pawn and Jewelry, Mercer Street, on a post-it note and stuck it to my phone. Then I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark and I thought about everything I knew and everything I suspected, and I made a decision that had been 24 years in the making. What Roy didn't know, what neither he nor Brenda had any reason to know, was that 3 weeks earlier I had discovered something. Something that had nothing to do with the ring and everything to do with why, when I finally picked up that phone the next morning, I wasn't just calling about jewelry. I had found a document in Roy's filing cabinet while looking for our homeowner's insurance policy. A quit-claim deed. For our house, dated 14 months prior, with my signature on it. I had never signed that document. I had never seen it before in my life. My hands were completely steady when I dialed Gold Star Pawn and Jewelry at 5 minutes after 9 the next morning. The man who answered said his name was Dale. I told him I was calling about a garnet ring in a rose gold setting with seed pearls, brought in the previous day by a woman named Brenda Calloway. Dale put me on hold for a moment. When he came back, his voice had changed. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "can I ask, are you the owner of the ring?" "I am," I said. I have documentation. My grandmother's name is engraved on the interior band. Another pause, longer this time. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come in, Dale said. And I'm going to need you to bring that documentation. There's something here you should see in person. He paused again. Also, I'm going to have to make another call this morning, to the non-emergency police line. I want you to know that before you come in, so it's not a surprise. I set my paper coffee cup down on the break room counter very carefully. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, and as I grabbed my coat and told my coworker Janet I'd be back by lunch, I realized that the ring, my grandmother's ring, my mother's ring, was just the beginning. Brenda had made a mistake that I hadn't made in 24 years of marriage. She'd left a trail. And now, so had Roy Dot. Gold Star Pawn and Jewelry was a narrow storefront wedged between a cell phone repair place and a dry cleaner on Mercer Street, with bars on the windows and a handwritten sign in the door that said, "Ring the bell if locked." The bell wasn't necessary. Dale Pruitt, the owner, was already standing just inside when I pulled up, and he unlocked the door before I even reached the step. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and the careful, cautious manner of someone who has spent decades navigating other people's worst days. He shook my hand and thanked me for coming in quickly. He did not smile. "Before I show you anything," he said, leading me to the glass counter at the back, "I need to confirm you are the legal owner of the item. You mentioned documentation." I set my folder on the counter. I had brought my mother's original insurance rider from 2009, which listed the ring by description: garnet, rose gold, seed pearl accent, antique, along with a photograph of my grandmother wearing it at my parents' anniversary dinner in 1987, and a photograph of me wearing it at my niece's graduation 2 years ago. I had also brought a copy of my mother's death certificate and the handwritten note my mother had tucked into the ring box, in her own recognizable cursive. "For Diane, keep it safe." Dale looked at every page. He looked at both photographs. He looked at the note for a long time. "That's sufficient," he said quietly. He reached under the counter and set the ring in front of me in a small velvet tray. I hadn't realized how tightly I was holding myself together until I saw it. The rose gold, the deep red of the garnet, the tiny seed pearls like a row of small moons, completely intact. My breath came out in a long, unsteady exhale. "She brought it in yesterday at 11:42, Dale said. "Wanted $300 on it. I offered $250. She took it." He folded his hands on the counter. "Now, here's the issue. When I process a pawn, I run the item. Standard procedure. We're required by state law to submit descriptions to the local police database, check for reported stolen goods. I ran your ring this morning as part of my daily batch." He paused. "It came back flagged." I looked up at him. "I didn't report it stolen." "No," he said, "you didn't, but somebody else did. 3 weeks ago, a report was filed with the Clover Falls Police Department for a garnet and rose gold ring matching this exact description. The report listed the owner as a Carol Calloway, currently residing at Meadow Creek Assisted Living." He watched my face. "Does that name mean something to you?" The room went very still. Carol Calloway, Roy's mother. 81 years old, living at Meadow Creek for the past 4 years, advanced dementia. "That's my mother-in-law," I said carefully, "but this ring was never hers. It belonged to my grandmother. It came to me through my mother." Dale nodded slowly. "I believe you. The documentation you've brought makes that clear. But someone filed a police report in Carol Calloway's name claiming this ring as her property, and I'm required to hold the item and notify the non-emergency line, which I've already done. An officer will be here within the hour." He looked at me steadily. "I thought you deserved to know all of that before you walked in." I stood there for a moment, processing. Someone had filed a police report in Carol's name. Carol, who hadn't had a lucid day in over a year. Carol, whose paperwork Brenda managed entirely. I thought about the quit-claim deed in Roy's filing cabinet, the one with my forged signature. I thought about Brenda standing in my bedroom, picking up my mother's ring off my nightstand, and I understood, with the specific clarity that only comes after a very long time of deliberately not understanding, exactly what I was looking at. Brenda hadn't just pawned my ring. She had tried to preemptively claim it. If I ever came looking, there would already be a police report on file in the name of a woman who could not contradict it, establishing a competing ownership claim. It was a small move, a petty move, but it was also a practiced one, the kind of move you make when you have done this before. "Dale," I said, "can I make a call while we wait for the officer?" He gestured toward the back of the shop. "Take all the time you need." I called my attorney. Not a family friend, not someone who owed Roy a favour, my own attorney. A woman named Patricia Holt, whom I had retained 11 days earlier, the same week I discovered the quitclaim deed. I had told Patricia then that I wasn't ready to move yet, that I needed to understand the full picture first. I told her now that the picture had just gotten considerably clearer. Patricia said, "I'll have my paralegal pull the police report filed in Carol Calloway's name. If Brenda filed that report falsely, that's filing a false police report, a Class B misdemeanor in Tennessee. If she did it as part of a broader scheme to defraud you or establish fraudulent property claims, we are looking at something significantly larger." A brief pause. "Diane, I want you to get a written statement from the pawnshop owner today, dated and signed. Everything he told you. Can you do that?" "Already planning to," I said. The officer who arrived was a young woman named Deputy Tara Winslow, and she was thorough in the way that young officers are when they sense something is genuinely off, rather than just domestic. She looked at my documentation, she looked at Dale's records, she took photographs of the ring still in its velvet tray. She took my statement. She asked me, very carefully, whether I had any reason to believe the police report filed in Carol Calloway's name had been made without Carol's knowledge or capacity to consent. I told her about the dementia. I told her about Meadow Creek. I told her that, to my knowledge, Carol Calloway had not had a conversation anyone could legally call informed consent in well over a year. Deputy Winslow wrote all of it down. Before she left, she said, "Ma'am, I'm going to recommend this be referred to our Financial Crimes Unit. This isn't just a property dispute." She looked at me steadily. "You should make sure your attorney knows about the assisted living situation. Elder financial exploitation is a separate charge in this state." I walked out of Gold Star Pawn and Jewelry 40 minutes later with my grandmother's ring on my right hand and Dale Pruitt's signed written statement in my folder. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 3 full minutes before I started the engine. Then I drove back to the clinic, told Janet I was sorry for the long absence, and worked the rest of my shift. I checked in patients, I answered phones, I filed insurance forms. I did not call Roy. That evening, Roy was in the living room when I got home, and Brenda was there too, sitting in the armchair she had always treated as her personal territory. She had a glass of sweet tea and the particular expression she wore when she had decided in advance how a conversation was going to go. "Dale called me," she said, before I even said. "He said there was a problem with the ring." She looked at me the way she had looked at me for 24 years, like I was a minor inconvenience that Roy had picked up somewhere and never quite managed to put down. "I don't know what you said to him, Diane, but that ring was reported." "I know what was reported," I said. "I was there when the deputy took the statement." The word deputy landed in the room like a stone in still water. Roy stood up from the couch. "Diane, sit down, Roy." I had never said that to him in 24 years of marriage. He sat down. "I'm going to say this once, and I need both of you to hear it. That ring belonged to my grandmother. It belonged to my mother. It belongs to me. I have documentation going back to 1987, and Deputy Winslow has copies of all of it." I looked at Brenda. The police report you filed in Carol's name is being referred to the Financial Crimes Unit. My attorney has already been notified." Brenda's mouth opened, then closed. "There is also the matter of the quitclaim deed," I said. "The one dated 14 months ago. The one with my signature on it, which I did not sign." I watched the color leave Brenda's face in a way I had never seen before. Not embarrassment, not anger, but actual fear. "My attorney is working with a forensic document examiner. That is a separate process and a separate set of charges." "Diane," Roy's voice had gone thin. "Diane, I can explain the deed. That was just it was for the refinancing. Brenda said we needed—" "Roy," I said, and I was surprised by how gentle I sounded. "I know you didn't understand what you were signing. I have believed that for 11 days, and I still believe it now. But that doesn't change what it is." Brenda stood up. She was trying to reassemble herself into the version of Brenda who ran things, the form and voice, the certainty. "You are making a mountain out of nothing," she said. "I borrowed a ring. I was going to pay it back. The deed was illegal—" "Brenda," I picked up my purse. "My attorney's name is Patricia Holt. If you'd like to discuss any of this further, you can contact her office." I took my car keys out. "I'm going to stay at my friend Connie's tonight. I'll be in touch with Roy through Patricia from here on." I walked out of my own house. I did not slam the door. I did not cry until I was 2 blocks away, pulled over under a streetlight, and then it was only for about 90 seconds. The compressed, efficient grief of a woman who has been steady for a very long time and knows she needs to stay that way for a little while longer. The divorce took 8 months. Patricia was meticulous. The quitclaim deed was confirmed as a forgery by 2 independent examiners. Roy's signature was genuine. Mine was not. Brenda had signed my name. Roy claimed he hadn't known. The investigators were not entirely satisfied with that answer, but the evidence supported him as a passive participant rather than an active one, and Roy, to his credit, cooperated fully once he understood the alternative. He signed every document Patricia put in front of him, and for once in his life, those were the right documents. Brenda was charged with filing a false police report, elder financial exploitation, because the investigation into Carol's accounts at Meadow Creek turned up 4 other unauthorised withdrawals over the previous 2 years, totalling just over $11,000, and felony forgery for my signature on the deed. She took a plea agreement that included restitution, 3 years probation, and a permanent guardianship prohibition, meaning she could never again serve as a financial agent for any vulnerable adult in the state of Tennessee. She did not go to prison. I won't pretend I felt nothing about that. But the guardianship prohibition mattered more than I'd expected it to, because it meant Carol was protected going forward, with a court-appointed guardian who had no last name in common with anyone who'd wronged her. Roy and I split the house. We'd owned it for 19 years, and the equity was real. My half was enough for a down payment on a small place on the east side of Clover Falls. 2 bedrooms, a yard with an old dogwood tree, a porch where I drink my coffee in the mornings now without anyone waiting for me to come back inside and accept an explanation. I still work the front desk at the clinic. I still know every patient by name. Janet brought me a casserole during the worst week of the proceedings, and my co-worker Marcus, who is 26 and has never been married, told me gravely that I was the most competent person he had ever witnessed go through something like this, which made me laugh for the first time in weeks. Dale Pruitt at Gold Star sent me a handwritten card after everything concluded. It said, "Glad it worked out. Come by any time. Dale." I put it on my refrigerator. My grandmother's ring is on my right hand as I write this. The garnet catches the light the way it always has, deep red against rose gold, the tiny seed pearls still perfectly set. My mother was right about me. I am the steady one. I kept it safe. It just took me 24 years to understand that keeping something safe sometimes means refusing, absolutely and without apology, to let someone else decide it doesn't matter.